we've got exactly the right voices that we need for this kind of conversation. And I hope this conversation will bring in a lot of interesting answers and a lot of food for thought regarding not just the Delhi Press Club but press clubs in general. Because I have experience of the Bangalore Press Club. I've been quite a few times to the Bombay Press Club, but having lived and worked in Delhi for so long, I don't really very often go to the Delhi Press Club. Maybe half a dozen times over the last 10, 15 years. So anyway, the Delhi Press Club is heading for elections, which gives us this rare opportunity. What really is the press club for at all? Does it fulfill an important role? Is there any need for a change? What role can it fulfill at a time when democratic institutions are being eroded? Or, is it really fair of us to ask these questions? So let's talk to three people who are joining us today. We have Paranjoy Guha Thakurta. He's a legendary journalist who has been part of several journalistic organizations and, pardon me, someone who has fought the politicization and corporatization of the media. He was also previously the editor of the Economic and Political Weekly and continues to be a practicing journalist. We have with us Pallavi Ghosh, who joins us from the field. She's a senior editor at CNN News 18, someone who has covered politics for a long time, and she's a former colleague of mine. She's running to be vice president of the Delhi Press Club. And we also have Nitin Sethi. He co-created the Reporters Collective, and he's also, interestingly, like Paranjoy, a fierce critic of the media. He's running in the elections to be a committee member. Paranjoy, I'll come to you. But let me begin. Why are you elections? You're a fierce critic of institutions, and yet you're a part of.
This is how I would put it, and I'll give a little context of why I stepped in. I thought this was the right time to do it, and what I might, if I'm a little more ambitious, that there was a need to do this. I, for very long, have worked in large institutions, legacy media houses. I have had the benefits of working with them, also faced the trouble of working with these. Over the last 1 year, we've set up a reporters collective. We've been trying to build new convening spaces for journalists to do good work of different genres. And it was kind of staring me in my face saying, there already exists one of the largest convening spaces for journalists in Delhi, for journalists of India. And clearly, to build an institution that has that kind of convening power and history takes years and decades, and it's always work in progress. And if we really at this stage want to recreate or strengthen journalism, strengthen the hands of journalists who want to do things, then this space exists. And if people like me, out of either middle class, typical middle class elite, claims of saying we'll stay out of this might be really tough or this might be difficult, we can stand out and crib. But if we don't get into it and say we are the ones who want the change, therefore we are the ones who should bring it, and we should try. It perhaps will be a learning. I kept on telling myself this is called the Press Club of India, but unfortunately for long it's acted like the Press Club of Delhi for a few. It's time it served its name well by others claiming and believing it's really the Press Club of India. There's a lot to be done there. I think in the last 8-7 years, several changes have been brought which have been very useful to that space. It's remained a place, relatively even today, a place for freedom of expression, a place for upholding constitutional values. But it's still not become the place where values, chances, opportunities, skills for all kinds of journalists in several regions and languages are available, which is the mandate of Press Club of India. I felt I need to get in because I have complained about this, I have desired this. It'll be foolish for me at this stage to say, oh, it didn't happen, but I'll not get into it and do it because it's a really tough ask. And it's a tough ask. I mean, all old institutions take a long time to turn around, to become something they haven't been able to become in the last couple of decades. I think I came in with the mandate. There are several things we like to do just to turn it into a place which is a happy home for all kinds of journalists. and a happy home where they all get a little thing more than just a place to sit and enjoy. I think
Okay.
that's the real function of a club as a convening space which helps us become better journalists.
Okay. Pallavi, it's ironic that each time I speak to you, you're in the field somewhere, and you're never in the studio, which is a great thing, obviously. But you're also television news. You don't fit the stereotype of the person who hangs out at the press club, which is also not seen as woman friendly at all. Yet you have been a regular in Parliament and at Raisina Hill, which also makes you part of the establishment, while at the same time you're not. Why are you running?
I'm glad you said that, Venkatesh, because uh, I'm a member of both the Women's Press Club and I'm a member of the Press Club of India. And I've stopped going to Press Club of India for years. And the reason is very simple, Venkatesh, because the perception about it is that that's a place where you get very cheap booze. You just come there, you drink. There are usually drunken brawls very late into the night. And the whole idea of any press club is that journalists, whoever, whatever point of view they may have, they can go there, they can mingle, you can have a conversation, you have those discussions. In a sense, the Press Club of India, I would say, has been, you know, has been privy to a lot of discussions taking place, because if you remember, there are those huge lawns which are outside, and I remember when there was this action being taken against NDTV, so we had Dr. Roy and all of them coming there, and there was this very healthy discussion. Some of us agreed with what was being said, some of us didn't, but that's not the point. The point is you had a place where you could discuss. But on every other day, it's just become a go-to place for getting cheap booze. And when you took this point of women, you know, not every woman reporter is a part of the Indian Women's Press Corps. That's kind of very sanitized from the point of view. You don't get booze there. You just go in for your lunch and your a quick evening snack. But Press Club of India was envisaged as a place where even a woman could go and drink, for example. But is it really convenient? Is it safe? I feel very uncomfortable there. So that's what we need to change. I mean, as you know, Venkatesh, I'm also going to be contesting this time round, first time ever. And one of the main agendas we are trying to have is to change this perception. The press clubs need not be a place for, cheap booze. You need to have a place which is thinking, where you can discuss and you can have different points of view. I mean, either you stand up to the government, you want to question the government, or whatever. I mean, or you have those other discussions. I remember Press Club of India also used to have these very nice art shows. They used to get actors there. We used to have these free for all discussions. All that somehow seems to have taken a back seat, and I, frankly speaking, think that this is where it should be. And you cannot have a Press Club of India where you have a large number of women journalists these days, TV, print, digital, and they don't feel comfortable. It should be their club as well.
Yes. Okay, I'm actually going to ask Paranjoy. I'm going to bring him in now. Paranjoy, we have two candidates here who have an ambitious agenda. Question is the press club? I refer to it as the Delhi Press Club. Is the Press Club of India? Is it a creature that can be changed? What are the challenges? I mean, you've been part of many institutions, both that seek to improve journalism and also improve the lot of journalists. So what is your take on this?
Okay, Venkatesh, I've heard what Nitin said, what Pallavi said. I'm by and large in agreement with what they've said. Press clubs in India are not, I mean, I've been to more than half a dozen of them. I started my career in Kolkata, and I've been a member of the Press Club of India, within quotes, on One Raisina Road, New Delhi, from the early 90s. When my friend, the late G.K. Singh, Guru Kirat Singh, he was standing for General Secretary and he wanted to induct members, and he said, "You become a member." So I became a member. And in fact, I must tell you, that's the only club I'm still a member of. I mean, I've become members of, but that's a personal point. As has been pointed out, press clubs need to be more than drinking holes. And typically, whether it be the booze companies, whether it be politicians who give them land in a prime location or have given them land in a prime location, or other corporates or other bodies who want to, be on the good books of the media and therefore give them freebies. No, I think press clubs need to be much more than that, and that's the role they play in different parts of the world. One, to act as a forum where journalists can come together, exchange their views, have healthy debates, discussions, organize seminars, conferences. Very recently, a kind of an association of press clubs all over the country have come together. I think it's not just issues pertaining to journalists and the media. I think press clubs have to provide a place where journalists from outside their home base can stay at a reasonable price, something that the Indian Newspaper Society does here in Delhi. It also needs to be a place where journalists, especially freelance journalists, can work out of, workstations. It's not just what you get with the Press Information Bureau provides you, the government of India, you have to be an accredited correspondent. It's easier to be a member of a press club than to be an accredited correspondent with the Press Information Bureau of the government of India. So it should provide all those facilities where, you can have internet connectivity, it's a place, workstations are there, you can work out of. So I think that role, press clubs, the one in Delhi and the ones in other parts of the country still have some way to go. I mean, I'll give you an example. For years, the Press Club of India, on one Raisina Road, it's in a dilapidated building. It was like Second World War vintage, if I'm mistaken, or probably older. They have a land, but raising funds to build a better place is taken an excruciatingly long time. Every single set of people who stand for election saying, yes, we will have a new press club here where we will have multi-storied building, we'll give this, we'll give that, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But finally, the movement has been very strong. Why is that so? Press clubs, instead of uniting journalists in India and journalists, I guess, in many other parts of the world, are notoriously divisive. They'd often work against their own interests. So instead of coming together on issues that are common, they turn to sort of highlight differences, So that's unfortunate. But I think the Press Club of India in Delhi and other press clubs are slowly changing. One would like the change to be faster. You not just provide a forum for different kinds of discussions, different kinds of press conferences, different kinds of people to come together without fear of favor. I think we still have to move in that direction. The executive committee members, the heads of these press clubs of India have to become more proactive in putting these things together. I'm not entirely pessimistic because in my career as a journalist over the last 43 years and having visited press clubs in different parts of the country and different parts of the world in this 4 decades and a little longer, I see change. I've seen change happening in other parts of the country. I've seen changes happening in other parts of the world. I think the one in Delhi needs to change a little faster. That would be good.
Okay. Nitin, I've been speaking to a few journalists today, trying to figure out what changes are needed. And honestly, many of them said to me, we don't even know, we're members of the press club, we don't even know how decisions are taken. The decision-making process is opaque. It's not only that it's opaque, but they don't even know how decisions are taken. So if you both are, and the rest who are taking part are hoping to change things, it seems like a huge, gigantic bureaucracy already. Do you have an agenda for, I'm going to do this in X number of days? It seems like this is the kind of thing that is going to take years. And as Paranjoy said, we don't have years. We have to do this yesterday.
So, this is easy to resolve if one decides to. I think something that our panel is trying to do, I'm sure others will also, I expect as much from them as we expect from ourselves, is to draw up a clear list of committed actions saying these are the 20-30 things we'll do. This is the framework and time frame against which we'll do it. And that we will report back to you every quarter, opening up how we're deciding, why we're deciding, where we're slipping back, and we'll take feedback from you. I think this has not happened. There has been, an inherent or inherited practice of saying we 10 people or 20 people know best, we've been here long enough and we'll do it, which is fair. I think several of them have done yeoman service if I look back at the club 10 years ago. But there is a faster turnaround of the generations that are coming in. Issues Pallavi raised, you raised, of how come women journalists, which are increasing in number every day, are far more empowered today than perhaps they were a decade ago. why they're not finding spaces. Again, our panel is falling short of it. I'll completely admit. We have only 3 women, and the other panel, I think, has only 4 women. It should change. And the first part we're committing to is that we'll give you a full agenda on a timeline saying these are the 10 things we want to do or 20 things we want to do, which goes beyond what beverages will be served and what food will be served, and judge us by this and hold us accountable by this. So the basic tenet that journalist talks about when we write about others saying transparency and accountability, I think if we impose it upon ourselves, it will work or they will make us work. And that's how it should be. We will put out saying, yes, everything we do, all decisions we take, we will share with all of you members frequently enough and open ourselves to critique, open ourselves to improvement, because some of us are young. I'm doing this for the first time. Pallavi is stepping in for the first time. I'm sure we'll make mistakes as well. But the only way to do it is to make sure everyone's part of decision making. Say women are, if say Pallavi's agenda is really for us of bringing women in central to this. Now I can say it's my agenda also, but it's best led by women who actually know what needs to be done. We should have a group of women, regardless of whether elected or not, to say these are the 10 things you buggers better do it now. I think that will set it up, saying put the pressure on yourselves to fail if you can. Increase it to the point that it's really, and do it, be smart enough to say these 10 things are the small steps, these 4 are the big ones. So like Paranjoy was saying, changing that building, I hope we can do it this year, but there are too many things. Even if that building doesn't change, it's not about the building, it's about what happens inside that building. And I think that can change overnight. That's not a big deal. Holding workshops, holding training, providing skills to journalists, providing skills in different languages, providing them spaces to, as Paranjoy is saying, coming to work, finding themselves spaces to talk to elder journalists, fighting with them as equals if need to be. I think those things don't really require much more than saying, have you thought about it? And we have, at least. It's clear for us, this is really the change this year, not the food and beverage alone.
Okay. Pallavi, I want to ask you a question about politics. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you covered the Congress party when the UPA was in power, and you cover the BJP when now it is in power. Now we know that there's a lot of political pressure on institutions of democracy, including the press. Where does that pressure fit in with the fact that the Delhi Press Club sits on prime real estate right next to Shastri Bhavan and really all the government ministries and very, very close to Parliament, the Parliament of India? How does the press club deal with political pressure? Okay, it looks like Pallavi we've lost the connection to her, but we'll try to get her back. I'll ask another question to Paranjoy. Paranjoy, for a journalist, there are so many institutions. It's almost like an alphabet soup. You have the Editors Guild of India, you have various press clubs, you have the Foundation for Media Professionals. For women, you have the Indian Women's Press Corps and the NWMI. And you have lots of journalistic associations. So where does a press club like this fit in? I mean, I understand that the Press Club of Delhi is really the Press Club of India, but so much of India's media is national centric, Delhi centric in the first place. So, I mean, where does it fit in for a regular journalist?
Okay, I mean, let's have more institutions. Let's have more associations. You forgot the unions. You forgot the DUJ and you forgot the Indian Press Association, and then you forgot the Foundation for Media Professionals, and now there's the digital groups. DigiPub is one of them. So let more associations come. I have no problem with more and more associations and unions and bodies coming together. That's nothing wrong with that. But let me go back to a question which you asked, Nitin. Yes, indeed. Journalists who demand transparency, or at least who are supposed to demand transparency from those who are in positions of power and authority, themselves often don't follow a transparent decision-making process. In the press club, I mean, there have been office bearers of the Press Club of India who have been accused of corrupt practices. There have been, I dare say there are some guys who've been there who are a disgrace to the profession, not only because they've stolen money. At least one particular office bearer, I rather would not name him, he was holding an important position. He has now become one of the most vicious propagandists. is much in demand among a section of people who spew hatred against a particular community. No prizes for guessing his name. I'd leave that for some other occasion. But you're right. You know, a press club of India has to supplement and complement what all these other associations that you named are trying to do. And I think the need for it is particularly important at this juncture when we find, and this is my personal opinion, when the space for independent journalism has shrunk, where we find a very, very large, substantial section of the media kowtowing, absolutely bending over backwards to please whoever's in power. You know, and that could be politicians in power, it could be bureaucrats in power, it could be military big brass, it could be the corporate top brass. So, I mean, the space for free expression, where the journalist is supposed to be that proverbial fourth estate, wo chautha kham hai na loktantra ka, he's supposed to be asking difficult questions of those in positions of power and authority. They're supposed to be, you know, holding truth to power. Unfortunately, so little of that is happening. The need for all the press clubs of India and also the press club of India in Delhi needs to be able to offer, be a part of the organization which will protect journalists. Look, journalists are under attack. They're physically under attack. And the journalists who are working in, I mean, not the chaps who are in Delhi, the chaps who are working in the smaller towns, those who are in, as Nitin rightly pointed out, who do not speak English in the way Pallavi and Nitin, you and I speak. They work in their own languages. They're under physical threat. And it's not just FIRs and false cases which have been put out against them. And it's not just about, you know, defamation suits which have been, I mean, there's a whole lot of things happen. I mean, there's a lot of documented evidence about how journalists have been under attack. I mean, they're being accused of sedition and not just defamation. Large numbers of journalists are supposed to be part of the so-called anti-national gang. So, I mean, the need for the Press Club of India to articulate and uphold the rights of independent media has become more pressing than ever before. I mean, certainly I became a journalist just after the emergency. And I think the need for that is much, much more, or as much as certainly, my view is it's much more, because we've been going through a regime which is not just intolerant of its critics, it's been vengeful. I mean, the number of, it happened during Indira Gandhi's time, during the Indian Express. So look at the number of actions taken by law enforcing agencies against media organizations. And I believe this has been essentially to intimidate and harass.
I'll try now, Paranjoy, because we've just got her back. And in fact, you set up my question very, very neatly for us. Pallavi, we've been talking about politicization of institutions, and the Delhi Press Club of India is so close to politics, situated literally surrounded by government offices. And you're someone who's covered politics and all parties for a very long time. How, as Vice President, will you be able to deal with political pressure? And given the fact that the press club is just physically so close to power.
Yeah, but the interesting fact is that you do have ministers, you have leaders from the current dispensation. They still go to a press club. They are those informal interactions which take place. And I would say the fact that the Press Club of India is situated within the vicinity of all the government offices is I would say, best exemplifies what it is all about. There should be a coexistence, and it doesn't have to be adversarial or confrontationist. We all need to kind of work together. Very often in some of the seminars of the Press Club of India, they do try and they do question the government policies, and many would say, okay, this is going to make the government unhappy, and therefore they are not going to be coming to a press club, or there's going to be a witch hunt. In my personal experience, I haven't seen that. I mean, as I said, I do find many leaders do come in there. They do have the informal interactions, and many of the ones who are members and those who are a part of the committee of the press club, they are actually people who cover the government. They cover, say, the Prime Minister's office, and these are the people they have to meet on a daily basis. So if they're always going to be confrontationists, it's going to be very difficult for them to work as a journalist, because remember, the whole issue about the Press Club of India is the fact that we are all working journalists, and therefore we are we are a part of the press club because of what we are, and we cannot be in a situation or a confrontation with the government or any political party. You can question them, yes, but that doesn't necessarily have to be acrimonious. I don't find a contradiction. There were certain suggestions, Venkatesh interestingly, who felt you cannot have a press club of India which is so close to government offices or on lease on a government land. But I don't think it necessarily has to be like that. They can coexist. You can convey this messaging to the political parties and to the government also that we are here because we are here and we can question you, but that doesn't mean that we have to be bitter towards each other.
Okay, you're advocating a non-confrontational approach, and I'll eventually come around to Paranjoy again. But Nitin, I want to bring you in on a slightly tangential topic, which is, Pallavi is clearly saying confrontation is not the way to go, especially when you deal with political parties. But my question is, the whole Delhi Press Club or Indian Press Club, the reason for it to be, which is, isn't it overly ambitious to want to represent all of India? I mean, shouldn't it just represent just Delhi journalists or NCR journalists who, after all, need representation and training? Because, each organization, each region of India has its own press club.
So, I wish it was possible for us to not be in the capital and still need to represent voices. My family is from Arunachal. For me, a journalist visiting from Arunachal also wants to find an association, a bunch of fraternity that he can or she can sit with in Delhi. The Press Club of Delhi, if you want to call it that, by the sheer presence where it has to function to whatever extent it can. It can never become the voice representing them, but it can become the home in Delhi when anyone comes here to facilitate for them what they want to do. So the Press Club of India is not there to say, I'm the voice of Arunachal, I'm the voice of Telangana also. It's just supposed to say, when somebody from Telangana comes here and wants to do his or her job, wants to talk about some things, this is the home in Delhi for them, the hub for them to come and do the things they want to. And that is a responsibility. I don't think that's a privilege. You'll never completely achieve that target because it's a subcontinental size community with very varied expectations, thousands of journalists across the country. You'll never serve the entire purpose. But how do you say I'll not even try and do it? How do you say, therefore, I'll remain cut off and I'll act as if I'm the bunch of entitled people sitting in Delhi? And Paranjoy is right. The real journalism, in some ways, the brunt of doing real journalism is suffered by our colleagues in the states. The least we can do sitting in this privileged space is to at least provide them that fraternal brotherhood and sisterhood saying, come and sit with us. We'll give you that corner in Delhi to sit, work, do your thing, meet people, present your point of view and engage with us. You can do one step more and say, we have the privilege of being in Delhi. Therefore, we have a certain set of resources that may not be available in your states. We will make them accessible to you. I mean, why can't Press Club of India do workshops in regional languages that are available in different states? Tie up with them. So use your privilege to your advantage, to others' advantage. Become the home that Delhi is supposed to be in a cosmopolitan town. And as Paranjoy said, become the space where constitutional values, where freedom of press is celebrated, encouraged and supported. There, I don't think any journalist of any hue and color can say, no, that should not be the case. I think if you do that, there's enough work to be done on just that agenda right now. I think it is hard. You're right. It's a big elephant. To turn it around might take time. But I don't think the first 10 steps are really that far off. The first 10 steps can be taken this year.
Okay. I mean, that's a very convincing argument. Paranjoy, I want to just go back to that issue of Pallavi saying that she doesn't need to be confrontational necessarily, or one doesn't need to be necessarily confrontational with politicians when you want to get things done. And I agree with that. But at some point, confrontation is inevitable, no? What is your perspective?
I disagree with what Pallavi has said. One can say one not necessarily be non-confrontationist. That's like a double negative. What's the difference between a journalist and a person who works in an advertising agency? What's the difference between journalists and public relations officer? In the 43 years I've been journalist, I've seen many dozens of journalists who claim they are journalists, but they're actually no different from PROs. They're no different from those who work as glorified stenographers. They are no different from those who actually should call themselves as members of advertising agencies. There's nothing wrong in working for an advertising agency, nothing wrong in being a public relations officer. Many of them are members and associate members of the Press Club of India, etc. But I think it's clear that the role of a journalist is to question those who are in power and authority. Right? It's not that you have to be blindly critical of everything that somebody in power does, but I think your primary role is to hold accountable those who are in positions of power. That's your role as a proverbial fourth estate. Therefore, we can quibble with the language as what is confrontation is, what is adversarial, what is antagonistic, and what is not. But I think journalism, the role that a journalist is supposed to play in a democracy, and I see these freedoms getting eroded not just in India, but across the globe. I mean, unfortunately, journalism has become a risky profession in more ways than one. It's not just financially risky, it's become physically risky. And as Nitin pointed out, we who sit in a privileged position in Delhi, we need to express not just solidarity, we have to actually provide support to those who are in remote areas, those who work in languages other than English, and those who are scattered all over the country, and the kind of threats they face from not just local government officials or politicians, but mafia gangs. I mean, why do we have to have so many international organizations bringing out annual reports to point out how many journalists have been threatened in the last year or thereabouts? So I do believe that we should be clear about the role of a journalist. We should be clear about the role of a person who works in an advertising agency, and we should be clear about the role of a public relations officer. These are all very, very honorable professions, but they have different roles to play, especially in a society, in a polity that calls itself democratic.
Okay. When we get back to Pallavi, I'll toss that to her. But I just want to get concluding remarks. Nitin, you have your task cut out for you. We've spoken about the lack of diversity and how there's not enough representation. The Press Club of India is not representative of not just forget Delhi, but not just India, but also Delhi. And we've spoken about how journalists have many other organizations to kind of turn to, but still that there is a golden opportunity here. Anything else you feel that we need to be talking about that you want to say?
So, I completely concur with what Paranjoy is saying. I am also very pragmatic that a Press Club of India will not change the business of journalism in India. It can't change the business, political economy of journalism, but it can provide the safest and the best defense mechanism, saying this much will not fall below, and there'll be a holding ground. And the Press Club of India is that holding ground.
I apologize, but I want to get to Pallavi before we lose the connection with her. So I'll come back to you. Pallavi, Paranjoy was saying you don't need a non-confrontational approach. I'll leave it to you if you want to reply to that. But honestly, I'm looking for a concluding remark. Do you really think that this is something you can make change? You can make a change going forward at the Press Club? Okay, it looks like we've lost her. Nitin, please, I'm coming back to you. Sorry for interrupting you, but you can continue.
To answer your question that you posed for Pallavi, how do I give up without trying? How do I say it's so difficult that I won't try, yet I'll keep cribbing sitting outside? Maybe I'll fail, but I'd rather fail trying rather than saying I never gave it a shot. I think for a lot of us journalists, typically privileged elite in some way or the other, we've stayed out of the Press Club saying, oh, this is not this place, this is not that place. We got to do it ourselves. There's nobody else coming to do these things for us. I think I'm coming in. I think Pallavi is also coming in saying it might take a turnaround. We might be able to do 70% of what we're claiming. But damn, I'm not going to sleep saying I never tried. I'll be more guilty than I am after failing.
Got it. I think that's a great point on which to conclude this conversation. And honestly, there's the supply side issue, which is an ambitious agenda. and a progressive agenda and a demand side issue, which is journalists should not give up on the press club or any press club for that matter, or any organization that represents their interests. Only if they demand change will change happen. So I think that's an interesting note on which we can conclude this conversation. Thank you so much, Nitin, Pallavi. I don't know if you can hear me. Paranjoy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.